There's a parasite living in your mind right now. It's not a virus, not a demon. It's something far more dangerous. Carl Jung called it the persona, a fake identity your brain constructed to survive. But now it's killing you. You didn't choose this mask. Society force-fed it to you. The obedient worker, the likable friend, the acceptable version of yourself that doesn't threaten, doesn't disrupt, doesn't live. And here's the truth you've been running from. Every second you spend wearing this mask, your real self suffocates a little more. Most people will die without ever knowing who they truly were, not because the truth is hidden, but because they're too addicted to the lie. The question is, are you ready to rip it off? What you call your personality is just a collection of habits, fears, and borrowed beliefs, none of them truly yours. Jung discovered that beneath this fragile identity lies the shadow, the repressed part of your psyche that holds everything you've denied: rage, genius, madness, power. Society calls this darkness evil, not because it is, but because uncontrolled truth is dangerous to the system. You were taught to hide it, to feel shame for it, to lock it away. But here's the secret. Your shadow isn't your enemy. It's the key to your freedom. The more you ignore it, the more it controls you from the dark. The choice is simple. Face what you fear or spend your life running from it. But there's a reason this truth is buried, because the moment you see it, you can never go back. The system doesn't silence you with force. It's far more subtle. It rewards you for staying small, likes, promotions, empty praise, all given to the mask, never to you. And the deeper you sink into this illusion, the harder it becomes to distinguish the lie from your own voice. Jung warned of this. People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. They'll chase money, status, distractions, anything to outrun the quiet truth whispering in the dark. But the shadow doesn't vanish. It grows louder in the only language it knows. Failed relationships, unexplained rage, that gnawing emptiness no achievement can fill. This isn't suffering. It's your soul trying to tear through the mask. And the most terrifying part, the mask wasn't made to protect you. It was made to replace you. Every time you silenced an impulse to please others, every moment you swallowed your truth to keep the peace, you weren't being polite. You were performing a slow suicide of the self. Jung called this psychic death, when the persona grows so thick that even you forget what's underneath. The world celebrates this decay. It calls it maturity, responsibility. But in reality, it's the systematic erasure of everything that made you dangerous, unique, alive. Your dreams weren't abandoned, they were sacrificed at the altar of belonging. Your anger wasn't forgotten. It was buried where it could only poison you. And now you wonder why you feel like a ghost in your own life. But there's a place where the mask can't follow, and it's closer than you think. It lives in the moments society can't touch. That inexplicable rage when someone interrupts your deepest work. The forbidden fantasies you'd never admit aloud. The visceral pull toward experiences that responsible people call reckless. These aren't flaws. They're fractures in the mask, where your true self bleeds through. Jung mapped this terrain in red ink. Dreams. Not the sanitized versions you share at dinner parties, but the ones drenched in blood and ecstasy that wake you at 3 a.m. with your heart pounding. They're not random. They're a direct line to what your conscious mind has buried, the unlived life demanding to be acknowledged. Every déjà vu, every irrational hatred toward a stranger, Every time you've been disproportionately wounded by criticism, these are clues written in the language of the unconscious. The shadow doesn't communicate in words. It speaks through the body. The tension in your shoulders when you betray yourself to keep the peace. The nausea when you force laughter at a joke that degrades you. The exhaustion that no amount of sleep can cure because it's not physical. It's the soul's fatigue from carrying a lie 24/7. The way out isn't more discipline or better masks. It's the exact opposite. Controlled disintegration. Not the fake vulnerability of social media, but the raw, surgical honesty of sitting with these questions. What have I pretended to enjoy to avoid rejection? When did I last feel truly alive, and why did I stop pursuing that? What parts of myself do I only allow out when I'm drunk, angry, or anonymous online? This isn't self-help, it's excavation, and the tools are simpler than you've been led to believe. Silence that outsources your worth, solitude that terrifies the persona, and the willingness to follow your repulsions because what you violently reject often holds what you most need to reclaim. The final mask isn't the one the world sees. It's the one you've convinced yourself is real. Jung uncovered a devastating psychological truth. The most impenetrable prison isn't built by society, but by our own internalized defenses. Through decades of clinical work, he observed how the psyche constructs elaborate self-deceptions, not just to present a false face to others, but to avoid confronting what we cannot accept about ourselves. This is the paradox of individuation. The closer we get to our true nature, the more violently our psychological immune system resists. Modern neuroscience confirms this through what's called predictive processing. Your brain doesn't perceive reality directly, but rather generates a model of the world based on past experiences. When confronted with information that contradicts this model, especially about ourselves, the anterior cingulate cortex and insula activate as if facing physical threat. This explains why genuine self-awareness hurts. It's literally interpreted by your nervous system as danger. The persona's most insidious function isn't deception of others, but self-deception. Consider the hero complex. How many pursue success not from authentic drive, but to compensate for unconscious shame? fMRI studies show narcissistic wounds activate the same brain regions as physical pain. Spiritual bypassing. The New Age trap of using enlightenment to avoid shadow work, what Jung called washing one's blood with water. Virtue. Signaling. Political religious identities adopted not from conviction, but to mask unprocessed aggression. Note how online moralists often exhibit the highest levels of implicit bias in psychological testing. The path to dissolution requires what Jung termed active imagination, not passive meditation, but dialoguing with these fractured parts. When a memory triggers shame, instead of suppressing it, you interrogate it. Why does this still hold power? What does it say about what I've disowned? Dream analysis becomes crucial here as the sleeping brain deactivates the default mode network responsible for maintaining the ego's fiction. Clinical studies on psychedelic-assisted therapy reveal the biological mechanism. When psilocybin temporarily disrupts the default mode network, patients consistently report breakthroughs mirroring Jung's descriptions of shadow integration, not as a theoretical concept, but as a visceral experience of reclaiming exiled emotions. This explains why traditional talk therapy often fails for deep transformation. It operates at the persona level without accessing the limbic and somatic imprints where the shadow resides. The ultimate reckoning comes when you realize your entire identity was built on reaction against childhood wounds, societal expectations, or traumatic experiences. True selfhood begins not with addition, new habits, affirmations, but subtraction, stripping away these conditioned layers until only the irreducible remains. As Jung warned, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. What remains when all illusions burn away isn't some enlightened ideal, it's something far more primal and terrifying. This is the great revelation that shakes every truth seeker to their core. Beneath all the layers of who you think you are, there is no perfect, polished self waiting to be discovered. Instead, you find raw human nature, contradictory, emotional, and beautifully imperfect. Carl Jung spent his life studying this moment of awakening when a person realizes they are not the hero of their story, nor the villain, but something far more interesting, a work in progress. The fear that keeps most people from this discovery is simple. What if I don't like what I find? It's easier to live as the person you're supposed to be, the good employee, the reliable parent, the socially acceptable version of yourself, than to face the messy reality of who you actually are. But here's the truth. No one tells you the parts of yourself you've been running from are not defects. They are the buried treasures of your psyche. Think of the last time you felt a sudden burst of anger over something small, were inexplicably drawn to a stranger or an experience, had a dream that left you unsettled for days. These are not random glitches in your personality. They are signals from your deeper self, what Jung called the shadow, trying to get your attention. The shadow doesn't communicate in polite words. It speaks through emotions, instincts, and the things you can't explain logically. The journey to wholeness isn't about eliminating these flaws. It's about understanding them. That explosive anger, it might be pointing to a boundary you've let others cross for years. That strange attraction to a reckless idea, it could be your soul's way of telling you you've played it safe for too long. Most people never do this work because it requires two things we've been taught to avoid. Honesty, admitting that you're not as kind, as patient, or as put together as you pretend to be. Responsibility, recognizing that no one is coming to save you from yourself. But those who do the work discover the great irony. The parts of yourself you've been ashamed of hold the key to your greatest strengths. The person who learns to channel their rage becomes unshakably confident. The one who embraces their unconventional desires finds creativity they never knew they had. This is what Jung meant when he said, "I'd rather be whole than good." Not because being good is bad, but because pretending to be only good makes us fractured and weak. And the world doesn't want you to know this secret. Your weaknesses are actually your superpowers in disguise. For centuries, we've been taught that our flaws are something to hide or fix. But what if I told you that your greatest struggles contain the seeds of your unique strength? Carl Jung discovered that the traits we most try to suppress often hold our hidden potential. That shyness you fought against, it might be the root of your deep empathy. Your tendency to overthink, that could be the source of extraordinary creativity. The truth is, society rewards conformity, not authenticity. From childhood, we're conditioned to hide our sensitivity and call it being tough. Suppress our curiosity and call it being realistic. Bury our strong emotions and call it being mature. But this conditioning comes at a terrible cost. When we cut off parts of ourselves to fit in, we lose access to our full potential. The very qualities we're taught to be ashamed of often turn out to be our most valuable assets. Consider these examples from everyday life. 1. The difficult child who questions everything grows up to be an innovator. 2. The overly emotional teenager develops into a compassionate leader. 3. The daydreamer becomes the visionary entrepreneur. Your so-called weaknesses are actually signals pointing you toward your true nature. That feeling of being too much or not enough isn't a sign that you're broken. It's evidence that you don't fit into society's narrow boxes. And that's your advantage. The people who change the world aren't those who perfectly follow the rules. They're the ones who learn to harness their unique combination of traits, even the messy ones. Your quirks and contradictions aren't accidents. They're the raw materials of your greatness. This isn't just philosophy. It's practical wisdom. When you stop fighting against your nature and start working with it, your energy stops being wasted on pretending, your relationships become more genuine, your work becomes more fulfilling, your life gains a sense of purpose. The path to self-discovery isn't about becoming someone else. It's about uncovering who you've been all along and having the courage to let that person live fully. As Jung put it, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But here's the painful truth. This transformation requires going against everything you've been taught about how to live. From the moment we're born, we're handed an invisible rule book for life. Our parents, teachers, and society teach us, control your emotions, follow the path, don't make waves. These lessons come from good intentions, but they create an invisible prison that keeps us from our true selves. The process of breaking free isn't about rebellion for its own sake. It's about recognizing 3 fundamental lies we've been told. 1. The lie of perfection. We're taught that successful people have it all figured out. But the truth is, every great artist, leader, and innovator struggled with the same doubts and fears you do. Their secret wasn't perfection. It was persistence. 2. The lie of certainty. We believe we need to have life completely mapped out. Yet the most fulfilling paths emerge when we have the courage to take one step without seeing the entire staircase. 3. The lie of approval. We imagine that if we just please enough people, we'll find happiness. But lasting fulfillment comes from being true to yourself, even when others don't understand. This unlearning process happens in small daily choices. Speaking up when you'd normally stay quiet, resting when you'd usually push through exhaustion, trusting a gut feeling that goes against conventional wisdom. The resistance you'll feel isn't a sign you're doing it wrong. It's proof you're doing it right. That discomfort means you're stretching beyond old limits. Like physical exercise, the growth comes from working through the resistance, not avoiding it. Society will test your commitment to this path. You might be called selfish for setting boundaries, unrealistic for following your dreams, too sensitive for honoring your emotions. But these labels reveal more about our culture's limitations than about your worth. The people who create meaningful lives aren't those who never face criticism. They're the ones who learn to distinguish between useful feedback and others' fears in disguise. This journey isn't about rejecting all advice or burning bridges. It's about developing an inner compass so you can discern when to follow guidance and when to trust yourself. The most fulfilled people aren't those who never doubt. They're the ones who move forward despite the doubt. The moment you start living this way, you'll encounter one final test, and most people fail it without even realizing. This test doesn't come in the form of a dramatic crisis or a life-changing decision. It appears in the quiet moments when no one is watching. When there's no applause, no validation, it's the voice that whispers, "Is this really worth it?" Because the truth is, self-discovery isn't a single breakthrough. It's a daily practice. It's choosing authenticity when it would be easier to put the mask back on. It's honoring your truth even when the world rewards lies. And yes, it's lonely at times, because most people would rather stay asleep than face the discomfort of waking up. But here's what happens when you keep going. Your relationships change, not because you demand it, but because you stop pretending. The right people stay. The wrong ones fade away. Your work transforms, not because you force it, but because you finally bring your real energy to what you do. Your life gains a quiet power, not because you've figured it all out, but because you've stopped waiting for permission to live. Carl Jung's greatest lesson wasn't about fixing yourself. It was about meeting yourself, not as you wish you were, but as you are. Flaws, contradictions, messy emotions, and all, because that's where real strength begins. Comment below. What's one mask you're ready to take off? The world needs the real you, not the perfect one. See you in the next video.